I know your firm, in conjunction with Merger Market, conducted confidential interviews with 100 leading strategic corporate buyers and asked them to self-assess their deal execution performance. What were the key findings?
That's a good question. I mean, there were a bunch. I would tell you, maybe at a high level for purpose of this discussion, a handful of things really jumped out to us. So, first one that was surprising. So think for a second about sort of the context where we were kind of careful in terms of who we selected. So we were selecting 100 again of the most experienced, sophisticated acquirers in the country. But what we found is, on a confidential basis, when we talked to them, almost everyone said that, at the end of the day, despite, what you read about us in the press or in case studies, the reality is we leave a lot of value on the table at the end of the day. So the first finding at a very high level was just that just about everyone, all acquirers in this market, when you close the door and have a confidential discussion with them, we'll tell you that we can get better. We can get a lot better kind of as an industry, which is one of the reasons I think there's a lot of interest in this field and kind of in this research and trying to do things differently. So that would be one. Second thing is that based upon this recognition, I think it's the ripples of that are kind of reaching far and wide, such that things like, for instance, due diligence, the nature of the due diligence activity and the focus of due diligence is changing. Whereas if we went back, even 10, 15 years ago, traditional diligence was a very financially focused kind of exercise. But I think today, given the fact there's this recognition of the risk involved in M&A, we're finding that companies now are much more interested in making the due diligence a more holistic exercise. So looking at things like IT due diligence and what are the risks there, looking at operations diligence, at HR, maybe even culture diligence, commercial diligence. So really kind of rounding out that picture. So that was one thing, and that was one of the clear hallmarks, if you will, between the successful deals and the more unsuccessful deals. Frankly, the first dimension was just how holistic was the diligence activity on those transactions, which was kind of interesting in and of itself. Other kind of key findings were, integration seems to be the area of greatest need, I would say. So I think there was one point in sort of the history of mergers and acquisitions, if you will, that maybe companies really struggle to identify strategically what are the right targets they should be going after. And then how do you establish the correct valuation so not overpaying for those things? To due diligence and taking a more professional kind of approach to diligence. We're making progress on all those things. I think now there's a recognition that the real problems and where we're losing the value in these transactions tends to be deeper in the M&A process. So kind of in and around integration plan development, then post-close, how do we actually execute on those integration plans? So things like that. The incremental complexity of cross-border international transactions, which is a huge trend these days as well. So there's a variety. It covers kind of a wide breadth of findings, but those are some of the highlights.